going to call the meeting to order at 7:03. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And tonight we are holding the first of our budget workshops relating to the 2018-19. I can't believe it's 2018-19 budget. I just wrote 2020 for the first time the other day, and I was like, holy moly. And I will, we're here just to discuss the questions that have been submitted in writing by board members, and I just want the board members to feel comfortable. If further question comes up as we're discussing an item, feel free to ask it. If administration can answer it, they will. If not, it'll get added to the list for another meeting. So I'll turn the meeting over to Dr. Fieser.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Glennon. Before we begin with our questions that would be beneficial, since so many board members are new, I'd like to introduce the staff members that are here this evening. So beginning in the bright orange on the far left is Justine Losello, who's our supervisor of Science and Career and Technology. Next to her is Sarah Cianti, principal of the Academy. Behind them, on your right, is Carrie Karamas, who is the principal of Pumpkin Delight School. Sorry about that, threw you off. Let's see if you listen. Bonnie Eatens, who is principal of John F. Kennedy School. Shannon Carlson, principal of East Shore Middle School. And Brian Scott, who is the supervisor of Social Studies and World Languages. And then over the right, in front on the left here, is Terry Devaney, who is our business manager. Behind her, you all know, I think, Pat Bradbury, who is our director of facilities. The gentleman in the back on the right, some of you have met, is James Zabanjak, former employee of the Milford Public Schools, now a principal in Shelton, an elementary school in Shelton.
And he's here because this is Karen Fortunati.
Karen Fortunati, on the Board of Aldermen.
Oh, sorry, Karen, we haven't met.
Yes.
Thank you. It's good to meet you. Thanks so much.
Are you our liaison? One of our
No, I'm not.
Oh, you're just here for interest.
Yeah.
Thank you
Well,
very much
that's
for being here.
That's
Yep,
great.
very good.
That's great. Super. And the other thing that I just want to say is we provided a revised sheet here, and where are the changes? If you look at Pumpkin Delight and you look at the number of staff, actually Pumpkin has 2 sections in every single grade level. So it's 2 all the way across, and that's a correction from what had been given to you prior. But just so you know, we corrected it so that it's correct up on the website. I just sent it out to all of the staff with the executive summary, et cetera, to talk with them about the budget process, and so all of this is correct. Okay?
Thank you.
So with that, you were just given the set of 48, I believe, questions that we received. Thank you very much for sending those in advance. While it takes us time to put together answers, in all honesty, it also helped us understand some of the areas that you needed greater clarification, which is really important for us to know. And hopefully you will, the answers that we're providing will be really helpful to you. And it may also prompt further questions, and if we can answer those tonight, we will. And if not, what we do is we jot them down, we'll write them, and then we'll try and have them answered by tomorrow evening when we meet again. So, if all right, Mrs. Glennon, I'd like to begin with the questions.
Yep, absolutely.
Terrific. So we're going to begin with this first question, which is stated as a non-budget related question. And I answered this, and I may be off base on what was being asked, but I think from the question, it was the issue of student data privacy and the act that was passed by the state legislature on now having to go into contracts with vendors that any of our student data may go to, and that has to be filed with the state. We don't file that with the federal government. So am I correct? Is that the issue? I think, Mr. Arnold, did you raise that question?
I think it was Mr.
It was me.
Oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
That's exactly what I was talking about.
Okay.
Sorry,
okay.
I wasn't more clear.
No, that's all right. That's okay. And so what I did was I quoted what the original law, there's much more to it, but basically it's that regional boards of education shall enter into a written contract with a contractor at any time, you know, that it provides access of student information, student records, or student-generated contact with such contractor. So a great example is those of you who have children in the schools, you know about Power School. So that's a vendor that we are engaged in a contract with. What happened when this law came out was that there was a major pushback from districts across the state who said, whoa, time out. Are you aware of what you're asking? If you're asking us to enter into a contract with every single vendor that has a piece of software that our teachers are using that our kids may be then using in classrooms, and maybe, you know, kids submit a piece of writing using this software, well, that's a piece of data from students that is included in the law, et cetera. So it resulted in a change in the date for implementation of this, which is July 2018. It also called for a task force to be created with legislators and people from the State Department of Education to sort of look at this. And it also required that the Department of Education, the State Department of Education, provide guidance to all boards of education on how to implement this. Because it's all tied to protecting student data, and we respect that enormously. You have an exhibit on the very last page of this document, which shows you, you know, a list of every vendor right now that we have contracts with. So it just sort of gives you an idea. But what you need to understand is that there are slews of free software out there that our teachers use every day in their classrooms. I would imagine there might be some that you use. Mrs. Vincent, you know, and part of that software may enable students to create documents. It may that they are answering questions, et cetera, and teachers can use that data then to give feedback, or maybe they're looking at where is the class in relation to a particular area in which they've been studying, so it's a quick assessment. Well, that's a piece of student data. Do we have a vendor with that group? No. So that's the issue that all of the superintendents and CABE, your Board of Education, you know, state group, pushed back and said, this is it's impossible. It's impossible for us to literally follow the letter of the law. So we're waiting to hear what's coming forth now, and what will we be expected to implement. But if that answers your question.
Yep, it does. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
For clarification, the vendors on this list, you're saying we use their software and we have contracts with them?
Yes.
Or okay.
We do.
So these vendors do have contracts with the state language, or just they have contracts, period?
We've entered into contracts with them, so they meet the standard of the state language.
Okay, so if we have a contract, it protects student data.
Yes.
The ones on this list. It's the ones that are not on the list that's.
Well, the issue is,
difficult to get.
I mean, we're assuming that some of the free data the free software that we use, that it, you know, it protects student data, but do we enter into, you know, a contract with them? I mean, this is free software
Right.
that somebody can access that is used in our classrooms. That's the thing that's just so difficult about it, you know.
Would they accept the terms of service, for instance? Like if you were to sign up, if a teacher individually was to sign up for a piece of software, would they accept the terms of service agreement for that as a contract?
Answer that?
It would depend on each individual software piece.
Okay.
You know. So just to clarify though, that we do have contracts, but the specific language cited in the law may not actually be in that contract.
Okay.
Which was the resulting concern of districts, because we would have to renegotiate all of these contracts, which would result in, you know, tremendous lawyers' fees, one would assume.
Okay.
So, and just even reviewing all the contracts to determine whether or not the appropriate language there, again, this is man hours and legal hours perhaps.
Okay.
The second question, Mr. Birch, you want to address this, the elementary enrichment program?
Sure, and just for the board's notification, we'll be presenting a more detailed report later in the spring as part of one of your regular meetings, but I'll do my best to give you an overview of the program right now without getting into too much detail. Under Connecticut special education law, all districts are required to identify gifted and talented students, but there's no mandate that says you have to provide a program for those students. But however, in Milford, we've had a long-standing enrichment program, and I don't even know how long it's been in existence, decades from what I understand. So we continue to provide that program. The process we use in Milford is we identify students in late 3rd grade. Currently, we are screening all students, and we come up with a list of, in essence, the top 5%, which is part of the law, of what we call gifted and talented students for the enrichment program. Then in 4th, 5th, and then through middle school, we provide an enrichment program. Currently, we provide, in each of the schools, students are pulled out of class for 1 day a week and work with a dedicated enrichment teacher. We have 2 enrichment teachers at the elementary level. They're dedicated to 4 schools, so they spend 1 day in each school, and then they rotate to, on their 5th day, to another school for some additional work with teachers and students. At the middle school level, we have 3 enrichment teachers, each specializing in a specific area, for example, STEM, and they will spend a semester working with the same group of students in 6, 7, and 8, pulling out for a day and working with them for that day. Then they move to another school the next semester. So you can see the 3 teachers rotate throughout the year. There are opportunities for students to be identified up through 8th grade. You know, we do have the screening for all students in 3rd grade, but let's say you want to heal that, or you have students move in, or students grow and develop differently over time. There are other opportunities, in 4th, 5th, et cetera, grades to get into the enrichment program. Yes.
Ms. Pinzens?
Thank you. You mentioned in the next budget, the 2018-19 budget, that you were hoping to get all of the enrichment programs kind of isolated to a particular location, a particular building. Would that include the elementary ed, or just middle and high school, or just high school? What are you thinking in terms of that?
Thank you. In terms of high school enrichment, we consider our honors programs to be the enrichment piece, but there's a lot of options for students, so we don't have a formalized enrichment program at the high school level. The proposal in the budget is that we would provide for a bus for students across town to go to one elementary building. So this is strictly for 4th and 5th grade. We are not making any proposals for a centralized location in the middle school. There's a couple reasons for this. One, that was the traditional way we had done it prior to reconfiguration, from what I understand. Again, that's some history I'm not that familiar with. But 2, we are identifying, in the past we've identified closer to 15% of students. As we get closer to the intended 5%, we have a grade level at 400 students. So 5% of kids is 20 students. So you can imagine across 8 buildings, that's 2 or 3 students. So having those smaller grades working together, 5 students, is not as beneficial as having 20 students come together to work together on larger projects and long-term projects. So we're seeing now that we've shifted to smaller groups, it's going to be more beneficial for them to come together into the centralized location.
You have a follow-up, Mrs. Pinzens?
Just out of curiosity, is that in terms of identifying students to go to these programs, is it based on standardized testing? Is it based on teacher recommendation? Is it a mixture of both?
Again, I'm going to get into great detail on this in the spring, but I can give you the overview. For 3rd grade, we use our standardized assessment, our internal one, which is NWA. We look back 2.5 years to see, we want to give students a chance to grow, or that, what's been happening in there. That's specifically reading and mathematics. But to get a greater sense of all students, we give all students the Torrance test of creativity, which is exactly like it sounds. I took it myself. You get a triangle and you see what you can make out of it. I made a tree, so clearly not very, put a little line and I was done, so not very creative. But so we send that out to be scored, if you will. We get back a tremendous amount of data for that, and then we use that information as a portfolio to identify, for example, let's say there's 40 students in one school. We might identify the top 8 based on that criteria, and then we go to a teacher input from there to identify the top students that we feel that, and the teachers feel, that are best suited for that. It is something that we pay close attention to because we are pulling students out for 1 day of the week. So if there is a weakness in reading, let's say they're tremendously brilliant in math on the top of the scale, but are grade level behind in reading, I would not recommend pulling them out of class for 20% of the time. So we really want to ensure that we're providing, you know, the best enrichment for students, and that and it's not impacting their other educational pursuits.
Mr. Zentrowicz?
Just one question, and it's budget related. Is there a cap to the number of students who can be identified and be a part of the program?
At this time, there is no cap, but again, as we move closer to that 5%, we'll be, you know, roughly between 20 and 30 students, which is a reasonable and manageable amount to transport to one location by grade level. So 4th grade, then 5th grade. And most likely those would be different days. We're still working on the logistics. You know, we have a lot of ideas in mind, but we need the approval of the budget before we can put a lot of these plans into place, because we do have to approve the cost of the bus.
So we'll say that the state, when they ask districts to identify, they're expecting the top 2 and maybe 3% of students. Because we have to submit every year, you know, the students that are identified. Again, there's no requirement to provide a program, but but we are required by law to identify.
Thank you.
My recollection from many years ago when my children were in school is that there's not technically a cap, but that there was in theory a cap, because for it to be a true enrichment program, you really should be only servicing those that truly qualify to be, you know, are considered enrichment. So, but again, so if it's budget related, fine, but we are gonna have a more in-depth presentation on that specifically. So if you want more information on the program, if you could, you know, just be a little patient until we get to that time in the spring. But if you have additional questions that relate to the budget on this, Mr. DeYoung.
Do you anticipate where the program is going to end up? What school it's going to end up in?
I have an idea of 2 different schools. At this time, I really prefer not to say.
Okay.
There's some logistics that are involved with that.
And then I imagine there'll be additional time out of class for students who need to be bused to that location, whatever location it ends up being. Is that?
The way we're envisioning is that the students be transported however they walk. Their parents drive them the bus to their original location, to their home school. And then after that, to give us our best bang for our buck with the buses, we would place our bus transportation within the 2 windows, the beginning and the end of the day, where the buses typically leave. So, did that answer your question?
Well, it was more of how much time they'll be out of class.
It's a full day. So, and a chunk of that will now be taken up because they will be on a bus up to maybe 20 minutes.
So they would be in the program for the full day?
Currently, they are in the program for the full day.
Oh, they are, okay.
Yes.
All right, so it'd be the same thing. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Ms. Pinzance?
In terms of FTE or full-time teachers, would this be a 1-teacher program or a 2-teacher program?
Again, as we're looking at the numbers and more specifics, we are looking into what are the possibilities for that. I do want to give one preview of our presentation in the spring. We are identifying the top tier of students, but there is a model out of UConn called the Renzulli model, which is about gifted for all. It's enrichment for all in essence. And we can envision the teachers, while they'll be working with a select group of students on one particular day, that they would be then pushing into other classrooms, coaching other teachers, working on tremendous amounts of curriculum development. We're looking at a capstone project in 5th grade, interdisciplinary project working with library media specialists. So there's a lot of other things that they can be doing to provide high-level work for all of our students in 4th and 5th grade. So we're excited by that possibility instead of limiting it to, you know, 40 students across the district in essence.
Currently, we have 2, is it 2 FTE for elementary
2
school?
FTEs
correct?
in the elementary and 3 at the middle school, for a total of 5.
All right, Ms. Federico?
Thank you. Can I just ask for clarification on the number of students? You said we're expecting about 20 to 30
Per grade level,
per grade level. Okay.
starting in 4th grade.
Starting, okay, and that's this year or next year?
I believe in 4th grade right now, we're right around 26 students.
Okay. And previously, how many were in?
Closer to 60.
Okay, okay, thank you.
So question 3, this is on the state reimbursement of special education. Mr. Ricciardelli, do you want to address this?
Sure. So with the state budget that was passed, obviously there was legislation that came with it. The legislature made no changes to the excess cost portion of the budget, except to add 3 words, which was within available appropriations. They specifically added that phrase. And so while we are not anticipating any changes to the funding at this time, the conventional thinking is that the addition of that phrase leaves open the possibility that in the future, if the state budget crisis continues, that there could be cuts to the program. But as of now, there are no cuts. There's been no reduction in the funding level.
Question 4 also has to do with special education, the expenses. Did you want to address those?
Sure.
This was tied to the frequently asked questions, number 5.
Yes. Let me just get to them. So the frequently asked questions are in your budget book. These would be found on pages A1 and A2 in the appendix. And the first one was what percentage of Board of Education budget is dedicated to special education, and so the audited amount for 16-17 is the last audited amount that we have, and so there is no update for 17-18 because we're working on that budget now. So the 16-17 audited budget is the last piece of information that we have. So that is updated at 20.77% of the overall budget. And then question number 6, we did update. We went instead of the 15-16 district profile and performance report. There really is no district profile and performance report anymore. But we have the numbers, and Carol, you were able to obtain those numbers. So the
16-17.
Right, for 16-17 school year, special education students for Milford comprise 12.6% of the total population, as compared to the state average of 13.9. I don't know, Carol, if you want to elaborate.
Well, I would just say that you could see that there's an increase in the prevalence rate from 15-16 to 16-17 in Milford and in the state, and that's a trend across the entire state. I do know that there are specific disability areas where the numbers are growing. They tend to be around the exceptionality of learning disability, other health impairment, and autism. And the increase is being seen at the middle school level and the high school level across the state. So it's just a trend in Connecticut.
So we're now going to move to the 1000s, which is the salaries, and there's a series of questions related to that set of accounts. So the first one on the, actually the next several are around world language. Do you want to address those, Mr. Burke?
Thank you, Dr. Fieser. And I have to thank Mr. Scott for his work on these questions as well as his input into our future world language offerings. The first question has to do with projecting what might be the cost if we expanded world languages into the elementary level. And we don't have a specific plan, but Mr. Scott has come up with an estimate of this at this time. And to provide instruction for once a week in grades 3, 4, and 5 in our current sections would require an estimated 4 additional world language teachers. In the district, we use a figure of $60,000 for any additional FTEs, so that would equate to $240,000. We estimate, again, approximately $3,000 per school for some supplies, as well as then some professional development time in the summer for those teachers and to develop the curriculum as well. So, however, with that being said, this is something that we wouldn't recommend to try to do in August. We would need some additional time to make sure we're implementing that well, or, at least one more year before we would even consider that.
Questions?
Okay. So the next question is about the potential for expanding world languages. Mr. Scott has currently completed the application. Excellent, well done, because I think it was due tomorrow. Hopefully you said yes, but it's through the TCLP, which you can see there's a Teacher of Critical Language program, which is through the Department of State. and their Bureau of Educational Cultural Affairs. And in essence, this is bringing in a teacher from China, the expenses for the travel to Milford, the housing, if I'm correct, and food.
Housing, insurance, and salary.
Okay, are all paid for by the program. However, that if we want to use this one person to split them between 2 or 3 schools, we would need to determine how would we transport that person. So it's still in process. The application was very lengthy, and they kind of have you project some guessings of, well, if you did get this, how would you where would they live? Well, we can't really work on that until we get the approval. So I give all the credit to Mr. Scott for using his crystal ball with that. So if that does not come through, we will look at some other opportunities that are out there, but just make the board aware that that may not happen by this September. This application would be for August of this year to implement the Chinese program at the high school level for this next school year.
Is there a time frame on when the application is acted on? Do they?
We submit the application in January. They said they would get back to us. The application is only the first step in the process. After that, we would have to get interviewed by the Department of State. By we, I guess I mean me. So we would have to get interviewed by the Department of State. And they would review our plan with us to talk about it and develop more detail. Then we would resubmit our finalized plan in March, and we should be hopefully in March whether or not we got approved for a teacher. I did emphasize to the person I spoke with that we would need some sort of information by the time students begin registering for classes. They assured us that that would not be a problem.
Okay. Questions, Mr. Zentowicz?
Just a quick one. Has there been a specific Chinese language identified? Which one specifically?
For this program, it is Mandarin Chinese.
Mr. DeYoung?
So this position would be just for for this year, and then it would function as a normal teacher,
So the way the TCLP program works is you do have to renew your application annually to continue in the program, so we would need to continuously renew our application as long as the program were to continue. In speaking to the other districts that were part of the meeting, most of them have been part of the program for 6+ years, so it is a long run. It's not just a short-term solution to the program. We modeled our plan very closely off of a plan that came out of Massachusetts, which was to start with 1 teacher and split them between the 2 high schools, and then to expand to 2 teachers in the following year through the program, 1 for each high school. The reason for that being, obviously, we would only have students in Mandarin 1 during the first year, and then in the following year, the teacher would be able to teach more levels of the course, and therefore we could use 1 teacher at each school.
What's the contingency if the teacher arrives here and hates it after a year?
So the teachers are contracted that they have to remain for the entire year. We did discuss that. The program does allot new teachers every year. It's a cultural program on their equivalent to Department of State in their country. They are all certified teachers of English in their home region, and then they enter into the program for the cultural experiences coming to the United States for 1 year as a teacher. And also to gain access to our professional development programs for teachers.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Pinzens?
Now, what is the benefit, if I might address you, what is the benefit of doing it this way instead of hiring someone who's certified to teach Chinese that already lives here, or that already has the degrees? It seems as though we'd be paying a lot more for this particular teacher than we would an all.
This program is completely free. We do not pay salary.
Okay.
We do not pay the insurance. We do not pay their travel to the country. We do not pay for their housing. The Department of State covers all of those costs. Whereas if we were to hire a teacher, obviously we would be paying their salary. The other reason for this, pursuing this program, because there are funded and non-funded versions of this program, we opted for the funded version. The other part of the whole equation, though, is finding a Mandarin Chinese teacher in this country is extremely difficult. And they're really, I spoke with the people both at Yale and University of Connecticut, and they said not only does their graduating class already have jobs, most of their students that have not yet graduated have already agreed to go to certain districts. So we just don't have access to get a teacher other than to have a teacher come here. There is another program that we will investigate if this one doesn't work out that is through the state of Connecticut. that would link Milford with a sister province in China, and we would gain access to a teacher that way, but that is not a fully funded program, so we opted for the funded program first.
Gotcha, thank you.
Very good.
So the next two questions are similar in terms of the additional 1.0 FTE we're requesting to implement the exploratory world languages in 6th grade of French and Spanish. The 1.0 is not directly attributed to 6th grade only. What this does is it adds to our numbers of world language teachers at the secondary level, and then we can then determine how existing teachers and the new teacher, the new 1.0, will be split. It's not as simple as saying they're going to spend, 2 periods here, 2 periods here, 2 periods here. It's not that simple. So what this does is add to our numbers and increases our overall FTE, and then we can redistribute as necessary with the new FTE as well as our existing FTE. The second part of the question is about we're adding French and Spanish into the 6th grade. We currently offer Spanish across all 3 middle schools, and we offer French only at West Shore right now. There is a plan to potentially next year begin French at least at one of the other middle schools because there was an interest for it, but then by the following year, once we go through the 6th grade exploratory year, to introduce French to the other 2 middle schools. So then we would have comparable programs between all 3 middle schools by the 2019-2020 school year. First time I said 2020. So we are looking again, and again, when we think of certifications, we have to think both high school and middle school. There's not a specific, in general, there's not a specific certification for middle school world language. Typically, our certifications go 7-12. So we can't look at it just at world language is not just 7-12, is it?
It's 7-12 with the option that the teachers can teach down 1 year.
Yeah.
There's also a separate foreign language elementary school certification that is, I guess pre-K, but K to 6. So with the 6th grade program, we could actually take applicants from both schools.
Thank you.
So if I understand correctly, then, if at whatever point we might bring foreign language down into the K-5, those teachers would have to have a different certification from what we
Correct.
currently have. Okay.
Okay.
So the next, question, number 9, I spoke to this the other night when I presented the budget regarding the reduction of 2 regular ed and 1 special ed, and indicated that that was an error, that actually there was a reduction of 3 regular ed teachers in the budget. So, okay. And then the next one, how will the staffing reductions affect class size? We don't anticipate that it is going to affect class size. We're very, very careful in when we determine reductions of staffing. We're always looking at the numbers. We examine our current numbers. We look at projections for next year, et cetera. And we never declare right now, for example, where these teachers are coming from, because it's only the mid-year. So we wait until May, and then again look at registrations that have come in from kindergarten, the movement in and out of the district. We're looking at registrations, for example, at the high school, how the numbers fall there in various classes. So we take a lot into consideration before we would determine where we would pull those positions out.
It's also important to note that these are not necessarily whole teachers, that there could be a .2 PE, .2 art, et cetera, so there might be pieces here and there. So there's not necessarily 3 teachers leaving. Also important to note that we already have, how many retirements? 7 retirements, so it is very unlikely that we would actually lose anybody out the door, depending upon certifications in the areas where we make the cut.
Number 11, I'm going to have Mr. Burt address.
So the question here asks, is our current board guidelines, these are not contractual guidelines, which are much higher. The current board guidelines ask us for a maximum of 20 in K2 and 25 in grades 3, 4, and 5. To reduce those to 17, I'm not reading this correctly, 17 and 20 for those 2 different tiers. In essence, doing that using our current class sizes, because not going to predict what we're going to end up with in terms of sections next year, but just using our current enrollment and our class sizes. In each building, we estimate that we need an additional 18 teachers, and again, using our average of $60,000 per FTE, that would, we estimate to be over $1 million in additional teachers.
Quick question.
Yes, Mr. Arnold?
The $60,000, is that just salary, or is that like a full headcount thing with, FICA, insurance, all,
No, that's typical wages. It does not include benefits.
Okay.
Benefits are carried on the city side of the budget, so,
Oh, okay.
so we don't consider those in taking into account. So, and 60,000 is a first-year teacher with a bachelor's degree makes around $45,000 per year. But in the upper end of the teachers, if they're at the top of the scale with a doctoral degree, they make much more than that. So we take a typical number in the middle, and that's how we budget.
Thanks.
Mr. DeYoung? Mr. DeYoung has a
Sorry.
question?
It's probably oversimplifying it a little bit, but you drop it by 3 students, the class size guidelines. Could you extrapolate from that if you dropped it by 1, it would be 6 teachers you would need, if you dropped it by 2, it would be 12, or?
So what I actually did, if you take the new handout I gave you, we can take any one of the buildings where you just look down the side and you look for anyone that had under, over 17. So I'll look at Ms. Karamis, I'll look at kindergarten in Pumpkin Delight, which is at the bottom of that first column. So we have 2 teachers there because we're below the 20 current guideline. If we drop it down to 17, that would require a 3rd teacher. So if we drop it to 19, do we keep 19 and a half, but you go to the next school up, Orchard Hills, we would still have to add another teacher there. So we could create as many scenarios as we want. It's all based on, again, this is on current enrollment. I can't predict where we might be in the fall.
Right. Thank
I
you.
think it's important to state too that, the prior board developed the budget priorities and assumptions that this budget is predicated on and was used to develop this budget. And, we do have to give some credence to that. I know this is a new board coming in. We may have different ideas, but at some point, somebody has to set those parameters. And that was up to the prior board to do that. In terms of something like changing our class size guidelines really is a question that needs to be looked at holistically and philosophically by the board, and probably something that goes a little bit beyond the budget process at this point. So I just think it's important for the board to remember that at this point in time.
Number 12, what would be the cost to add paraprofessionals? Again, Mr. Burt, would you want to address that?
Similarly, did the same exercise, went through, identified all of the classrooms that were within 3 students of the maximum current guidelines, and we identified 37 current elementary classrooms. Again, using a similar allocation for FTEs and professionals, for paraprofessionals, we used a figure of $22,000. So 37 paraprofessionals at $22,000 would be approximately $800,000.
The next question has to do with the curriculum, writing requests. Pull your act together there.
Can we skip to 15?
Sure. For a second, we'll skip 2. Number 15, the staff analysis on page 15 shows a decrease of -2 on special education teachers. However, the information provided at Monday's meeting indicated there was no decrease in special ed. Would you want to explain that, Mr. Swift?
Sure, absolutely. What you're seeing there with the decrease of 2 special ed teachers is really a reallocation of positions versus a reduction in positions. So what we have there is that one of the special ed teaching positions moved to a school psychologist position. So if you look at that original chart, you'll see that the school psychologist positions increased where the teaching position decreased. And then the other piece is that we have a full-time special ed behaviorist position. We just had one of our behaviorists retire, and it's very difficult to find a behaviorist who's also a certified teacher. And if we take those monies and move them out of a teaching position and put them on a line item that is called non-certified assistance line, it allows us to hire someone who perhaps is a board-certified behavior analyst who is not a teacher, whereas we can't if we leave it under the teaching account. So it broadens our ability to hire differently. And then you'll also see, I'm gonna jump ahead and answer number 16 as well because it's all related. So you'll see that under account 3235, which is entitled Other Pupil Personnel Services, we have a current behaviorist that we pay for out of that line. And so to make everything make sense, we took the monies from there and moved it up under the non-certified assistance line to be sure that we hold that position under the same account.
Does that make sense? Ms. Pinsent?
Ms. Swift, do you feel like in moving that line from the teacher's line, that you're looking for a BCBA not necessarily with a teacher certification? Do you think that would diminish the position in any way, or do you feel like you would have a better chance of hiring someone in that capacity?
I know we'd have a better chance of hiring,
Okay.
because when we do post, we get so many applicants, and when we read through their application, they don't have a teaching certification.
Okay.
And, we've interviewed them, that they have tremendous skills, they're in other schools, so they understand the educational system. So it doesn't seem that it's great if they also hold a teaching certification, they are just so hard to find.
Thank you.
I would add also that the State Department of Education supports behaviorists wholeheartedly. And there are state universities, University of Yukon, Central, is it, or Southern, offer programs to get certified as behaviorists, but they're not, with that certification, teaching cert does not come with it. So they're in a catch-22. They're incredibly skilled as behaviorists, but in a school system, they don't have a teaching certification. So
Right.
it's, they get scooped up instantaneously from other agencies.
Okay, thank you.
This is a position that, when we first implemented it, it was identified as a position that you're gonna get a lot of bang for your buck. It's really, and I know it's a growing trend, but it's been like a revolving door of people over the past, how long has it been? 4 years, maybe? 5 years?
I'm trying to remember when we first hit.
But it's been, you see it in the Human Resources report, it's just this constant turnover. And
Well, quite frankly, behaviorists make a lot more money than teachers. And so if we hire a behaviorist under the teacher contract, the pay is lower than what it would be if we could hire them at a behaviorist pay rate. So that's why it's hard to keep them.
Yeah,
We're not
right.
competitive at
Yeah.
all.
Mr. DeYoung?
Can you just briefly explain what a behaviorist is to me?
Sure. So they have intensive training in how to analyze a student's behavior and put in a plan in place that teaches the student how to develop whatever area or skill area they're deficient in. So it might be how to cope with something when it doesn't go your way and the child doesn't have developed coping skills. And so they'll put a whole plan in place that the whole school team then is trained on how to respond to this child who's not learning in the same manner most kids learn incidentally, but they need very direct instruction on how to develop their social, emotional, behavioral responses. So they're highly trained, really skilled at data collection, data analysis, and then creating behavior plans and monitoring to make sure the student's making gains.
And they start working with the students at the kindergarten level?
Even preschool.
Preschool, okay.
And children who really, this is not typical behaviors.
No.
Right.
This is kids who really, really struggle with
Yeah,
their
sure.
behavior.
Okay, thanks.
Mrs. Federico?
So I have two questions. First, so how many behaviorists do we have altogether?
Three. We have 3 positions for
Okay.
behaviorists.
Okay, and now they will all be in the non-certified assistance line?
Right now, we have one who is a teacher
Okay,
and is, started here as a teacher
Stays as
and
a teacher.
is, a behaviorist and is staying, as far as I know. Could find out something different tomorrow. And then the other two, we're going to move to that other line item.
okay. And then the other question is, can you briefly explain the shift from a special education teacher to a school psychologist?
So
Is that just a change in the needs?
So what happened was that was a behaviorist position that we had posted forever, and we couldn't fill it.
Okay.
And it was posted forever and ever, so then we hired a behaviorist under that other pupil personnel services outside of the teaching contract, because
Okay.
that person was able to come in and help us. So then we had this FTE position that we couldn't fill with the behaviorist, and we opened that program at Foreign last year. I don't know if you remember when we talked about it. And it's a therapeutic program.
Yes, okay.
And in order for it to be, we hired a highly skilled school psychologist who was a practitioner, a private practitioner beforehand in all those types of therapies that support students with emotional difficulties. And so that's where we put those monies.
Okay.
Mr. Pawlowski?
You mentioned that the behaviorists generally are paid more than the teacher. By not hiring at a teacher level necessarily, does that make us more competitive and less likely to have turnover in that position?
It will make us much more likely to be able to hire and keep somebody, for sure, if we can be competitive in our pay.
Okay. Can we be competitive?
More so than when we operate outside of the teaching contract, yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Great, so we're returning back to question number 13. And that's around the summer curriculum.
So thank you to Mrs. Etense for a cough drop. Hopefully I can make it through the rest of the evening. So 13 is about curriculum writing, and it references $75,000. I want to make sure everyone understands that's a $75,000 additional increase to a $100,000 line, so the total amount is $175,000 for curriculum writing. The other part of the question is how does the figure get developed and what are the target curriculums? In general, to walk you through the process, each of our instructional supervisors work closely with teachers and building administrators to take a look at existing curricula as well as any new course proposals or any new ideas. And they also recently passed, just as of the fall, a new 5-year curriculum cycle trying to create a systemic approach and a systematic approach to curriculum writing so we don't have 5 major areas all trying to write curriculum at the same time. So in working with that new cycle, as well as working with what their expertise is in their particular departments, they bring forward to me as part of their budgets some curriculum writing requests. And then what I do is I take a look at the sum of those requests and I bring forward my budget, which includes their budgets, to the cabinet, which eventually makes its way into this budget. The way we determine the amounts for individual courses, again, it's estimating because we estimate, say, for a 4th grade math curricula, we might get 4 teachers in the summer. Then we say, well, what's the extent of the revision for that 4th grade curricula? Is it just revising what we currently have? Is it an entirely new program? So that would require a different amount of days. And then we multiply those teachers by the hours by the days, and it gets us an amount. That's all collated and aggregated up into this total amount that we bring forward to you tonight. So just in terms of what are the target areas, and specifically there's 3 major areas, 2 of which are on the writing cycle for next year, which is elementary English language arts and social studies secondary level. Those are in their major areas for curriculum revision, so a large portion of the money is going to those areas. Science also, they're actually a year out in the cycle, but because of the new standards, we kind of have to go off of the cycle because we do need to address the needs of our students and of the changes that were taking place. In particular, we're changing our scope and sequence for the incoming freshmen next year for science. We're revising our 3 courses that are coming, that our students will experience because the demands of the standards as well as the assessment they'll eventually take in 11th grade require us to integrate earth science into our courses, whereas perhaps not all students would experience that. Just so you know, we're going to give you more details on the science scope and sequence in the next couple of months at a presentation at a regular meeting. Other areas that are still, we just got into this cycle, so we are catching up in some of these other areas, so there's going to be some minor curriculum writing that's taking place, as well as some new ideas. We are looking at interdisciplinary capstones at different grade levels, as well as we've recently been working on social emotional learning, and that work is continuing over the time. They are actually a part of the curriculum cycle right now in terms of writing for next year, and then some revisions to our art and math, just again to fill in some holes where we've not done it in the past, and that will eventually catch us up into the cycle, so we're all aligned to the cycle in future budgets.
Ms. Hennessy.
I know that the American Association of School Librarians and also released new standards in November, and over the summer, the ISTE refreshed their technology standards. Would the library media specialists or any technology integration specialists be involved in curriculum writing, perhaps during the interdisciplinary work for capstone?
In particular, we're looking at those capstone projects, as well as we're looking at some new experiences for our high school students, which we'll be bringing again forward in a couple months. And core to that work will be the library media specialists, because they will be the hub, if you will, of a lot of those experiences. I discussed earlier with the enrichment program, we're looking perhaps at a 5th grade project for all students, a capstone project. Obviously, library media specialists and the library media center would be core to that to help create those interdisciplinary experiences.
I'm sorry, Federico.
So in the middle of that paragraph there, you talk about a portion, a significant portion is 104,000. That's for the 3 major areas.
Correct.
So then the remaining 70,000 is for like the last 4 areas listed down below.
Correct, and
Okay.
on a regular basis, our schools have a SCIP plan, which is a continuous improvement plan. And every 2 years they go under a major revision of those, but each year they do some minor revisions. So it might be 1 day they meet in the summer. For the major revisions, it might be 3 days. So a portion of these funds go to those improvement plans to ensure that they're aligned to district goals and our initiatives within the district.
Okay, and so the funding is mainly to pay the folks who need to do that work over the summer?
Correct.
Right, okay. All right, thank you.
Question number 14 has to do with the coaches' stipends and why the increase. Mr. Burt?
Thank you. So to remind the board, the base of this line is approximately $700,000. And just to remind the board, we concluded our contractual negotiations with the teachers union, was that last summer?
November 2016.
Wow, okay, so a year and a half ago. As if you were here for the presentation in November of the MOUs on the stipends have been unclear in the contract over the past number of years, and the agreement with the union was signed in November, but it took us a full year to clean up the additional stipends. As part of that work, we identified all the stipends in the district for coaching as well as for enrichment, after-school activities, clubs, etc., as well as some additional stipends for certain positions. And that was all quantified and clarified and put into place in these MOUs, which was approved by the board in October 10th, November of this year, this past year. And as part of that, there was a general wage increase that was part of the contract of 1.5%. So if we take $700,000 and times that by 1.5%, a portion of that's about $11,000 was attributed to that. One other element that came out through our discussion was that we have 8 teacher leaders in the elementary levels. Their work is similar to that of the deans in that they spend extra time after school each day, either before or after school, as well as additional days in the summer, working with the principals on a number of activities. To align that more closely with the deans, we did increase those stipends significantly, which resulted in approximately $27,000 being added to this line. So, and then there was some additional adjustments to some stipends that weren't really necessarily aligned with each other, so we quantified everything. That resulted in some minor adjustments as well, which would round out to $42,000.
So all of the stipends are part of the union negotiation, part of the union contract, correct? And all encompassed in negotiations, when there's a wage increase, they get the same increase. The
Correct.
stipends are increased by the same percent.
Correct. I hope.
So we'll jump to benefits now. This is question 17. Can you expand on how the educational reimbursement is granted? So the tuition reimbursement is granted to teachers and administrators such that if they take a course, they pay for the course, and then if they submit it, they get 50% of the cost of the course minus any additional fees. And then our paras can get reimbursed $100 per course if they do not already have an associate's degree and they're working toward such a degree. So the increase, if the more, for example, new teachers coming in, they're all begin to work for their master's degree, which ultimately is required by the State Department of Education. I forget how many years they have to complete their master's, but they have to complete it. And then we have administrators who may be going for to doing doctoral work, or actually maybe going for an additional degree, et cetera, related to whatever their role is. So that's part of the reason why that there's that increase. And then number 18 for the education reimbursement, I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Riccitelli.
Yep. So the amount that's expended is the actual amount that's applied for through the teacher's contract. Teachers, administrators, and paraprofessionals. So when you see the expended amount, that's the exact amount that was paid out under that benefit. So the other question though is why the fluctuation? And this is a good point to point out something that's going to come up probably several times tonight when we're talking about fluctuations in certain areas. And I ask you to turn in your package to Roman numeral 10 in the executive summary, where this is account number 2008, education reimbursement. And so when we're budgeting, we look at the historical data that we have. And so when we were putting together the 17-18 adopted budget for this line, we were looking at the expended dollars from the 15-16 year, because the 16-17 year was part of the adopted budget. It wasn't, we didn't have the benefit of what we actually expended because we were in that current fiscal year. And so the board budgeted $55,000 based upon what was expended in 15-16, and then anticipating a slight increase. So last year, so this year, in putting the budget proposal together, the 18-19 proposed budget, we're requesting $80,000 because now we have the benefit of the expended dollars from 16-17, which was $79,496. And we expect that trend will continue. And so what does that mean for 17-18, this current fiscal year? It means that we're probably going to be somewhat underfunded in that account, and we'll have to cover other areas of the budget. But this will come up because there was other questions, why the fluctuation from year to year? Because as I said to you the other night, budgeting is not an exact science, and so you base it on prior data, and you base it upon the best information that you have at the time, bearing in mind that some of these dollar amounts are not going to be spent for at least, in some cases, a year to 15 months from the time that the budget is considered. So just a little bit, but that's why there's a fluctuation. We anticipate that the $80,000 that's budgeted in 18-19 is a good number based upon our history from last expended year, which is 16-17.
Mr. Arnold?
Just a question about the benefits. Going back to the requirement of $60,000.
Yes.
You said that the benefits portion is handled by the city.
Yes.
How come I'm seeing them here?
That's the next question.
Yep.
That's coming up next.
Okay. Sure. There's a benefits line. When I said that the benefits were handled on the city side, the health insurance benefits.
Okay.
There's other benefits like life insurance, workers' compensation, social security, taxes, and things like that. But specifically, that big chunk, the health insurance line, which is over, for the board's portion of it, about $19 million, that's carried on the city side of the budget, not here.
Okay.
However, in account 2006, Blue Cross Blue Shield, we do cover the costs for retirees' health insurance supplement.
Okay.
And so when a retiree, when somebody retires from the Board of Education, when they turn 65 years old, they have to apply for and enroll in Medicare. And then from there, based upon their contract, their working contract that they retired under, it specifies what supplemental benefits they will receive in retirement. And that's where that line 2006, Blue Cross Blue Shield over 65, it pays for the supplemental health insurance for retirees only, not for active employees.
Okay, but if I'm adding head count, doesn't that impact that figure down the road? And I know it might be difficult to calculate, but the $60,000 is not just, there's usually more of a cost associated with adding personnel. And I think that's part of it.
There is, but it's not actual budgeted dollars. You're looking at wages. Wages is one thing, what we're gonna pay that employee, and the wages that are in your budget are actually calculated to the employee that we have on our books.
Yep.
The additional dollars, there's nowhere in our budget that you will see that $18 million that we pay out for health insurance. Sure, it's a liability, it certainly is a liability for the city and ultimately the taxpayers of Milford, but it's not a number that's carried on the board side, and so we don't budget for it.
Mm-hmm. It's just in terms of the decision to add head count, the $60,000 is just a little understated. And there seems to be,
yes.
There'll be a legacy cost that gets difficult to ever get out from under, that's all.
Understood. The cost of a teacher is, the overall cost to the city of Milford for a teacher is much more than $60,000 per year when you add the benefits into it.
Mm.
But the board is only considering the wages for that employee, and the average that we take is $60,000.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. DeYoung?
Let me just go back to the education reimbursement quickly.
Sure.
Is there a set of schools that they're allowed to attend, or can they attend, if somebody wanted to attend Southern or Yale, I mean, it's a huge difference in cost.
No, there isn't. As long as the course that the student is, or the teacher or the administrator is taking is within their subject area, or if it's not, it needs to be pre-approved by the superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as it's part of the coursework, we don't dictate where, and
Okay.
the contract doesn't allow for us to dictate
Okay,
what school that they would go to.
great, thank you.
So the next question has to do with the health plans, Mr. Ricciatelli?
Sure. Okay, so we'll talk about them separately. Active employees and retired employees. The health insurance basically is dictated by the contract that the employee is working under. The cost, the insurance that they receive is paid for by the city through a self-insurance fund that is administered right now by Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. The city currently has a request for proposals that's out, so in the future that administrator may change. But right now, employees, both on the city side and the Board of Education side, receive benefits through the Anthem Blue Cross network. There's different plans. There's many, many different plans. I think on the board side alone, we have about 45 different plans, because every year, there's 7 employee groups plus the non-union employees. And of those, every time there's a new contract, there's a new employee group that's created. So, and then as people move off the plan, then those groups retire, but they add up. So there's many employee group plans. The majority of them are PPOs, the traditional insurance that you go to the doctor, you pay a copay, and you receive the benefit. There is a very small number of employees that are still on the HMO plans, but those are being phased out. They're out of all of our contracts now, or they're in the phase-out stage of all of our contracts, and quite honestly, they're so expensive for the employees themselves through the cost share that most of them have dropped the HMO. The trend, and within, I would say probably a decade, all employees of the Board of Ed and the city will be on what's commonly known as a health savings account, or an HDHP, which is a high deductible health plan. We won't go into what the differences in the plans are, but just that there's 3, and right now all of our contracts specify that new employees must join the HDHP, and then over the course of a 3 to 4 year period, the cost of the PPO plan rises significantly, so that there's a great incentive for the employees to move to the HDHP plan, which is a much more costly for the city, who's paying the bill. The taxpayers are paying the bill. The HDHP plan, municipal entities, governmental entities are way behind the commercial world. Most most people who work in the private sector have been on an HDHP plan for several years anyway, and that's the trend that we're going to. So those are the basic plans. Every contract specifies the co-pays, the deductibles, and the amount of cost share the employee will, or the percentage of cost share that the employees will pay. That's the basic plan for regular active employees. And then, as I already stated, with the over 65, once somebody retires, they become they reach age 65, they exit our plans, they go on to the Medicare, they enroll in Medicare, and then whatever their contract specified, the board pays for the supplemental insurance from there. That's kind of an overview, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Mr. Dion?
To go back to what Ray was saying about, Mr. Arnold was saying, the $60,000 number we use, I understand we use that for our budgeting purposes, but we also have to get approval from the Board of Finance and then the Board of Aldermen.
Yes.
Do we know roughly what the number is that the Board of Aldermen would look at to say each teacher in this district, each new teacher or each subtracted teacher would save 60,000 plus what that number is?
It's difficult to say. It's difficult to put a dollar amount on what the cost of benefits for an individual employee are, because the city's self-insured, they pay the bills for every employee. So a young employee that doesn't have any dependents, rarely goes to the doctor, that's costing the city a very, very small amount. If anything, some people don't go to the doctor the entire year. Whereas there are older employees that cost truly significant amounts of money. So what they use is the COBRA rate, and COBRA rates for a family plan, don't quote me on it, but in the area of $28,000 per year.
Okay.
For a single, it's about $16,000 to $18,000 per year, and then there's somewhere in between is for a couple plan. So that's generally what they would use for the COBRA rate, but you can't tie it to an individual employee.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
My experience with the Board of Aldermen is that they tend to look at the whole dollar, say, like we're carrying X millions of dollars for health insurance on our side, rather than, zeroing down to each teacher X amount of dollars. They look at it in total.
Understood. Thank you.
Question 20 is on unemployment. Do you want to speak to that also?
Sure. As a governmental agency, the requirements for us are that we pay dollar for dollar for employees who are eligible for unemployment. You should know that we do challenge where we believe that that there's a legitimate challenge and that the employee is not entitled to benefits under the unemployment compensation laws. We will challenge those, but if we ultimately are required to pay in accordance with law, then we pay dollar for dollar. And there's really no way for us to determine in advance how many people are going to go out. How many people. We've had reductions in staff for teachers and some paras, but there haven't been layoffs because we've been able to absorb them through attrition. So there's other employees throughout the district, custodians, secretaries, who may leave the employee of the city and apply for unemployment compensation, and if they're entitled to it under the law, we're required to pay it. But there's really no way of predicting it beforehand, and so again, we go on those historical averages.
Any question on that? Okay.
So the next set of questions are on contracted services, and the first set of questions is all on the asset management system. So do you want to speak to that? And I know Mr. Bradbury is here as well.
Sure. I'm just going to give a brief overview. Dr. Leaser talked the other night about the broad overview picture of why we believe that this will be an asset management, an asset for the district. And so I'll just talk very briefly, and then Pat Bradbury, our Director of Facilities, who will oversee the system, who will oversee and be responsible for the implementation and the maintenance of the system, which is a couple of the questions that came in. So the system that we would purchase is we would purchase the system, the software and the licensing. We would be paying for the implementation and training, and I think I hit that one. Schools. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, yes, and we would be paying for, with this $77,000, we would be paying for the data collection, which is the biggest piece of this, for the 2 high schools and 3 middle schools, which is about 2/3 of the square footage and 2/3 of the assets that are in the district. I think with that, that's what I told you the other night, and with that I'll ask Pat to elaborate a little bit, and then of course answer any questions that you have.
Okay. Part of the reasoning for this is as we add on to these schools, we have a work order. Part of the reasoning for this is we have a work order system that I already use with a PM program that we are adding systems to that we use with the fire department, emergency light testing, portable fire extinguishers. What's happening now is we're adding so much equipment, East Shore Middle School, West Shore Middle School, the Florence High School renovation. We're adding more air handlers, more pumps, more circulators. And we've done an assessment before in a simpler term, but this will help us gather all the data from all the buildings, because it's not getting to the point where, as we do our capital improvement plan, I want to be able to provide you with a report that gives you a true status of the equipment in our buildings. There's so much equipment here that we need to have a better plan of a replacement cycle. I take East Shore Middle School as an example. When we just did a $20 million renovation there. When I start losing air handlers, I'm not going to lose 1 or 2 at a time. I'm going to be using the whole roof system which will probably be about $300,000 or $400,000 to upgrade that. So I'd like to have that out to say, hey, in 10 years, 15 years, we're gonna be looking at some substantial dollars that we need to replace with this school. The data collection is the biggest piece of this. Can we do it in-house? We could. It'll take me 20 years to get it all done, and we'll go nowhere. I've worked with this company that we're looking at. They'll do the whole data collection for the the high schools, the middle schools, because that's where the bulk of my equipment is. And then we can look at the other schools as we move forward. I don't want to do the whole district now. I won't be able to keep up with the whole system right now. So that's the purpose of it. There's so many different layers between, fire alarm, intercom, access control, cameras. All this stuff is great that we've put it in, but I have to replace it at some point. And I would rather replace it as a district level rather than an item level, if that makes sense. I don't want to just be replacing them as it breaks down, because they're all in the line to be replaced. Teacher's desk, student desk, we need a replacement plan for all that. We can't just do it as needed. We need to know ahead of time, and we're looking at 500 desks that we gotta get into the system at some point. It's just better for us to have that plan ahead of us rather than do it as it pops up. Any questions?
Mr. Arnold?
What are you tracking? Time, usage?
We're tracking really time, usage, age is a big thing.
So time.
Yeah,
Like
time.
we bought it on, September 15th and 2017 and 2000,
Right.
September 15th, 2027. It's been here 10 years.
Been here 10 years.
Okay.
Now, some of us, our stuff has been here 30 years, 40 years. So what we're looking to do is to get all this in one spot. So in the big capital improvement plan that goes across the street, I can say, hey, these are in here now, but they're coming up 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road. So Jim and the staff can have a better eyeball of what's coming up, rather than me just springing it on last minute.
But
the
like
roofs
even
will
your
be-
air handlers
Air
are
handlers, right.
by time, not by
Time.
hours run.
It's
It's
all
not
by
like we're
time.
monitoring anything,
Right.
like
And
motor
then
usage.
Right, and we're not gonna get the years out of what's going in now that we've had with the equipment that's in here now. It doesn't last as long.
Mhm.
It doesn't, so.
Pat, is part of the data collection, isn't that assessing the condition of the systems that we have? So that we know where they are at this point?
It'll absolutely give me a timeline of life expectancy of each piece of equipment that we have. We've started some of it, we're never gonna get there, to get it all in one spot.
Mr. Polowski?
Does the management system include the estimated lifespans for each piece of equipment? Or is that something that you would say, oh, this desk, we're gonna replace it every 10 years?
They'll give us some industry averages of what they think it'll be, and then we'll be able to adjust that on what we think we'll get out of it.
Okay, and who's the vendor?
One of the vendors, one that we have a host of software with is School Dude. That's one of the things, but we will be looking at other options. That's the only one I have a quote from at this point. But that will tie into the whole suite of products that I have with them.
So it's someone we already have contracts with?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I could just interject there, because this overall, there's a requirement that the city has that anything over $25,000 we need to go out to bid for. And so generally we would. However, in some particular cases where it's proprietary, there are areas where you wouldn't go out to bid. One of them is if a certain vendor holds the state bid. The Department of Administrative Services for the state holds contracts with many vendors, from carpet to vacuum cleaners, honestly, that you can purchase right off the state bid in lieu of going out for RFP or RFQ in your own district. And so many times, we will purchase right off the state bid. And I believe that the current vendor that we have that hosts our current system is the state license holder. We'll check that out, but we will follow all the requirements for bidding if it's not on the state bid list.
So it's possible it could be one program that you're looking at, or it could be a different version of a similar program from somebody else.
It would really be the program isn't the big issue, it's the data collection
Mhm.
that we would shop for.
Okay.
And then importing it into mine. That's the big piece, is getting all that data into my system.
Ms. Federico?
How long do we expect this to take?
It'll probably be, if we move forward in the summer with this, with the budget year, it'll probably take a full year to get everything, all the data collected, the
Okay.
PM schedules written, and so we can start looking at it.
Okay.
Ms. Vincent?
As helpful as I know this would be for you, for sure, this would also probably mean that more things are replaced more often. So how many more man hours do you anticipate that would incur?
For replacement?
Right, just to turn over all of these things that you say, you know, all these desks are going to need to be replaced in 10 years.
My bigger point, I guess, is to at least get the date, so we know the state of what we have now. And we can at least plan ahead. It may not happen, we may say it takes 10 years, but Jim said you gotta make it last 20 years. That's the bottom line. You know, I can tell you everything, but at least we're telling you. At least we're saying, this is the life expectancy of this piece of equipment. We can either replace it now, or I can keep repairing it to the end. That's what we're really looking to do, is to give us a baseline of the status of our equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. DeYoung?
Does the city currently have a system like this in place?
No.
I'm sorry.
The city, no.
The city does
I
not?
don't believe
Okay.
they have anything like this.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so there were a number of questions. I believe that we probably could skip down to question number 25, if that's, unless there's something that wasn't answered in those, in the previous questions. But question number 25 is the 77,000 included in the 3306 contracted services account? And the answer to that is yes, it's included in that account. Account number 26 is on moving away. Are we okay with moving away from the
Is everybody okay with that asset
inventory
management
management
system? Ms. Federico?
One more question. Referencing question 23, when we were talking about, is there a way to estimate the amount of dollars saved? And it's not really something we can anticipate or explain in the short term. But I'm wondering, you know, if the board is gonna spend this money, how do we see the results? So perhaps in the 2019 capital improvement plan, when you come to us, you'll have better information, or when you come to us with the 2020, that seems to be the buzzword for tonight. When you come to us with the 2020 plan, we'll have better information, documentation. How will we see it?
That's an excellent question. You brought up the capital improvement plan, and for many years, in the capital improvement plan, we have replacement of unit ventilators and boilers, and every year it gets pushed to the bottom of the 5-year capital improvement plan. It never seems to make its way up to the top. What this system will be able to tell us is factually, what is the system, what is the condition of every boiler in the district, and how many more years are we gonna get out of it? And if we don't replace it by this date, what's the cost gonna be to continue to repair it? So so then there can be an analysis that's done when we come to you with our recommendations for the capital improvement plan, but also when we go across the street and we say, these boilers have to move up on the list. They can't stay down at number 5 anymore. They must move up. And here's the facts. This is why. And then you look at the old saying, you know, you can pay me now or pay me later, and we're either going to pay huge costs in repairing these big, huge pieces of equipment, or we're going to replace them, you know, on a scheduled cycle through the capital improvement plan. So that's just an example of how this will benefit us and how you'll see some of the benefits that start to play out over the years.
Do you want to add, Mr. Bradbury?
It just, you know, my goal is to tell you where we're at. What we do with it is what we do with it. But what we need to know is the state of where we are. And we can put it forward in the capital improvement plan, and they can make a choice. whether they're gonna replace the boilers or they're not. But we've given them the information, the state, the age, and what we're putting into them to maintain them. You know, that's the key here, is to give them the full knowledge of what we're dealing with, because nobody knows. And when I walk out the door, that information goes, and we don't have it in a place that says, hey, those boilers are ready to go, or those air handlers are ready to go, nobody told us. Here it is, here's the list with the life expectancy on it, so at least we have something to look at.
So you having that, we would also have better information, right?
Absolutely.
So instead of boilers might cost X, we could have 3 boilers at such and such location and the estimated cost of each, because you'll have those specific details.
Correct.
So we'd get more detail
Correct.
instead of
There'd be more detail.
some of the
Make the better
guesstimates.
decision. And I think we can do better system-wide, rather than looking at it as one school, 2 schools. Now we're looking at systems that are district-wide. Because when we
Okay.
try and wait to do a school at a time, it's 15 years before we get to all of them, do a replacement. So, and I think our dollars could be better spent looking at the whole district rather than just isolated schools.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Polowski?
From what I'm understanding about this isn't necessarily a investment that will come around and we'll get our money back down the line. It's more of a, hey, we're gonna invest this now and put this investment into our infrastructure so we know exactly the state of our schools, so that come down the line, we could say, hey, this boiler is at 10% efficiency, it needs to be replaced in 2 years, we have to be able to plan for that and adjust for that kind of going forward. And we can back up with hard data through this system exactly what needs to be done at what time, and we can budget more correctly, more efficiently. But it seems like a useful system.
But what I'm hearing you say is that also by looking district-wide, you get, I mean, if you're replacing something, several units across the district, you're gonna pay less,
We're
you
gonna
know,
buy
per.
better. We'll be able to
Right.
buy better.
Bulk.
That's really.
Bulk buying,
That's
right.
really the whole thing. We'll be able to bid better and buy better.
Okay. Any other questions on this before we move forward? Okay, very good.
So we have, question 26 then?
Sure. So, question 26 is the additional $27,000 for security enhancements. What's that specifically what it's for? And I just, Dr. Fieser mentioned it the other night, but in the last 4 years, we've added over $3 million worth of state-of-the-art security infrastructure in the district, largely through state grant and through bond authorizations from the city. But with that new equipment comes continued upkeep, and so that continues to rise. The replacement cycles on that we also have to take into account, but specifically the $27,000 is for the cost of monitoring for additional quick link stations that are in our schools. We put in quite a few more quick link stations, and let me stop at this point and say to you that we come to you once a year and give an update or a report on school security, and that's scheduled for the February meeting. So what I'm talking about now will be elaborated on at that meeting. But specifically, this will pay, the $27,000 will pay for the additional monitoring of the quick link stations that were put in last year, and it will allow us to purchase a new software which will enhance our ability to detect threats and other school-related concerns on social media. We don't want to talk too much. There are certain things when it comes to security that we don't like to talk about in open session, because we don't like to give the bad guys the details. But we can elaborate at some point if the board so desires.
Ms. Federico?
Just a quick clarification. The cost of monitoring the additional quick link stations, is that gonna repeat every year?
Yes.
Okay. But the new software purchased is a one-time?
Right, but we'll have to pay an annual maintenance or an
Okay.
annual license fee for that software. But the software itself the purchase of it is about $16,000, and I'm going to guess that the annual licensing is probably about $2,500 to $3,000.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Is that your
So the next section is facilities, so Mr. Bertuccelli is going to continue.
And so is Mr. Bradbury. But the question number 27 is the buildings and grounds projects that are listed in your budgets. The question is, it's only a small portion of the requests. So I will say to you that Mr. Bradbury, in conjunction with the building principals, has a list of all the needs of the school system, all of the things that need to be, to be replaced in buildings and grounds projects. What we bring forth to you each year really only pays for the first and second priorities for each of the buildings. That's the Board of Education budget has not been able to sustain much more than the first and second priorities. And so that's what's listed in your budget, basically first and second for each school. But it's become customary for administration to come to the Board of Education in April or May and identify certain areas, particularly buildings and grounds projects, equipment in some cases, where if there's surplus money at the end of the year, these are the areas where we would supplement what's in your budget and purchase or undertake buildings and grounds projects. The board has honored those requests and seen the value in allowing administration to continue on to that priority list to do some of those buildings and grounds projects. And so that's what we would plan to be doing again this year, is come forward with a list in April or May of additional projects that could be done if there is money left over at the end of the year.
Mr. DeYoung?
Thank you. The expended for 15-16 on building, actually building and grounds, and then 16-17 expended. First question is, does that include the additional monies that were approved in April?
It does.
It does. And so what portion, do you have roughly what portion was approved in April versus what was in the budget?
Well, if you look at, we'll just take the expended years, 15, 16, and 16, 17. We've been pretty steady with two, between buildings and grounds, coming in somewhere around $500,000 to $600,000 in the budget. But you can see that we've spent far more than that.
I'm sorry, where are you looking?
I'm sorry, this is on the executive, I'm in the executive summary.
Yeah, what account?
Roman numeral 11. And on accounts,
4304 and 05?
4304 and 4305.
Okay, sorry.
Right, no, that's okay. So generally, for the past 3, 4, maybe even more than that years, we budget about $500,000 to $600,000 in buildings projects and grounds projects combined. But as you can see, we spend far in excess of that, and that's that additional money that the board has designated at the end of the year, if we have it available, to be able to do those kinds of projects.
So in 15-16 and 16-17, roughly, you think it was about 500,000 that was budgeted?
Correct.
For the building projects?
Correct.
So
Total, together.
Total.
Building and
Total.
Oh, between between the two of them?
Right.
Understood, okay. Mr. Bradbury, can you talk about, you say the first and second priorities, what might those be, and what are the things that have been left? I know you can't talk specifically about what's been left off, but can you just give an example of those?
What happens is, in buildings projects, we'll say.
Yeah.
So what's been submitted to me for the budget is about $2.8 million in projects. And so what we'll do is, we'll say at Captain Meadow, the list is the nurse's office millwork, in other words, new cabinetry for there. We have some classroom cubbies that are gonna get done, that's 1 and 2.
Okay.
And then we go to new room signage, replace all-purpose room ceiling, classroom, it goes right down the list. So we have roughly 10 items for each school building project.
Okay.
And we try and prioritize them to what the principals need or feel is their top priority. And then I'll jump in and, if it's the function of the building, that the request time goes out the window, and I go for the function of the building. If I need something that needs to be fixed immediately, a door, something like that.
Right.
And that's how we prioritize them, and the ones and the twos usually go into the budget, because we don't have enough, support to get 2.8 million, which is fantastic. I mean, what we get is fantastic,
Yeah.
and at the end of the year, if we get one or two more, it's a huge help. And that's where we really have made our progress with floor tile replacement, parking lot paving. All that stuff it can come at the end of the year, and it's been a blessing that we've been able to get so much done at the schools with that end of the year money.
So you said paving and tiles, those were last year's projects, or?
Well, I think I did some floor tile abatement at Captain Meadow with some end of the year money. That was in the budget, a little wing of floor tile. That's the sort of things I'll be on over the summer.
Mr. Bradbury will give us a very ttintillating presentation in the November, probably, of
Yes.
the work that they've
I
done.
saw that one this year.
Yeah.
It was a barn burner.
Ms. Pinzette?
Now, is this something that the freeze account that we spoke about previously would have anything to do with? I mean, I know that we talked about a freeze account basically being a reserve fund, and ideally for the principals, could they allot that
Yeah.
in some way to their school? So could, third priority on the list, be it not done by the budget, could the freeze account kind of cover some of these things?
Generally, we would release the freeze account money to the principals if we're in a position to do so, if that money's not otherwise needed, because there are items that the principals have budgeted for, that they're holding back on purchasing. None of this is to say that the things that we're holding back on, there's no excess items or anything like that. They're all needed items.
Right.
But just because of the availability of funds, we're just not able to purchase them all. But I can assure you that the small amount of money that is released to the principals and the freeze money is put to very good use within those school buildings.
But does not fall within this category of buildings and grounds?
No.
The freeze account is
Thank you.
designated, it's part of the which object?
The
It's-
6,000
So
accounts.
that's a specific object series, and
Thank you.
actually, the board would have to approve a transfer of that
transfer of
money
that
to,
money.
yeah.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
and the 6,000 is the instructional and non-instructional supplies.
Thanks.
Mrs. Gorman?
Oh, Mr. DeYoung, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Could you, I know you can't give an exact number, but could you estimate what it would cost to go 5 deep as opposed to the first 2? I mean, even if you can't do it now, and
I can get you
you
that.
go
I
there,
can get
that'd be
you
great.
that. I can break it all out to each priority, find all the costs. So we can- Jim and I can-
That would be really helpful, thank you.
Any other questions on this?
So we're down to 28. What does TTL by LVL stand for? Total by level. Number 29, which is about contracted maintenance, Mr. Ricciatelli?
Yes, and this goes back to what the example I gave to you earlier about predicting the year before when we don't have experience from the prior year. So when the budget was set for contracted maintenance in, let me get to the right account here. So I'm on Roman numeral 11, 4,200 contracted maintenance. When the budget was put together in November, December, January of 16-17, we didn't have the 16-17 expended numbers yet. And so we were basing it off of what we had previously, I'm sorry, the 18, I'm getting myself, it's the 60, we didn't have the benefit of the 16-17 numbers. And so when we actually only, and I shouldn't say only, but when we spent $482,000 in 16-17, that was about $50,000 less than what had been budgeted by the board, which was $531,000. And that was spread out amongst many different departments, from facilities and maintenance to special education to the finance office, many different offices. And then combined, it amounted to about $50,000 less than what we had budgeted. And then when this budget was put together, we're looking at the actual contracted maintenance, what we believe that we will need. But again, it's based on the $561,000 budget, not what we had previously spent in years past. That answers it.
Does that make sense?
Okay.
Ms. Federico?
So if we know that now we know we spent 482 in 16-17. We don't know for sure if the 17-18 budget is correct. How do we know we need 579?
We actually, we're basing it on 531,000, because that's what we actually, that's what we actually budgeted, and we believe that we'll spend in this current fiscal year, 17-18.
In 17-18, we believe we'll spend 531, not
Correct.
561.
That's right.
And in 18-19, we're gonna spend 579.
Yes, that's the current requests that are in for that account.
So that's 48,000 more. Okay, it just,
We can ask them to give us some more detail on that if possible.
yeah, maybe you could just give us a little more detail on why it's going up over
Sure.
the actual number?
We can do that.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Ms. Penzance?
Does that jump have anything to do with the possible extra one FTE custodian for West Shore?
No.
No.
No, that's in a separate, that's in a salary account.
Oh.
We'll get you greater detail on what question, goes into that 4,200 account.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Sure.
Any other questions on this?
Last one,
Are we set to go forward? Okay, go
last
ahead.
question on this area is number 30, the utilities.
Sure, yep. How much of the utilities expected savings is due to, or are we attributing it to the solar installations? And the previous board, when they were talking about the board priorities and assumptions, there was considerable discussion about how much should be allotted for, or how much savings we should predict or estimate. And the board at that time decided that without actual history, it would be difficult to put a number exactly on how much we're gonna save from solar before we actually even have them put in. And so we've taken a very modest amount and reduced those schools, those 7 schools that will have the installations in by next year.
Does that answer? Ms. Federico?
So if you have the modest amount, can you tell us what that was?
Yeah, I believe we figured around 8%.
Okay. 8% for those schools.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll move now into transportation, and the first question is around field trips. Mr. Burke?
Thank you. So for this specific item, we pay for the buses and transportation for specific field trips that are embedded into our curriculum and assured for all students regardless of what school or classroom they happen to be in. There are some examples listed here. We make sure that all of our students, say in 2nd grade, would, in our elementary school, go to the Audubon Center, they go to the Milford Historical Society, Foreign Planetarium, etc. In addition, other than transferring students to another location, we bring in assured experiences into the district. A number of these have been going on for years. For example, Peter and the Wolf, which is the New England Ballet Company, and the New Haven Symphony, they come here to Parsons and we bring students here, and this line item pays for those buses. In terms of the other questions in this particular line, how many field trips are there per year? If for these assured experiences, there's about 20 of these across the grade levels. In terms of other field trips, there's approximately 360 field trips. These are set up by teachers or teams of teachers in individual buildings, And those are based on curriculum, what they believe to enhance the curriculum for those students. Those field trips are typically paid by the students. If there's a family in need, then we do have funds to help support those students.
Mr. DeYoung?
How often are the assured experiences reviewed and changed?
Our instructional supervisors review these on a continual basis. Some of them, however, are more cultural, something that's been in existence in the district for years.
Sure.
Like the Pier and the Wolf, and we have the Nutcracker come in, and these are just experiences that have been going on for years and years. And those are just something that we believe enhances the overall experience for students rather than is tied to a specific curricular objective.
Mr. Zentrowicz?
Just specifically where the district funds come from for those families in need.
We have a student activities account that we use for that line item.
Thank you.
32, Mr. Riccitelli, question
Sure.
on regular ed transportation?
Yep, basically the question is, we've identified in the 18-19 proposed budget, we've identified savings in regular education, and the question is, are we currently in the 17-18 budget recognizing savings in those same accounts? And the answer is yes. As I pointed out on the quarterly report that was presented to you on Monday night, we anticipate right now that we will have a surplus in regular education transportation, which encompasses all the accounts that are listed on Roman numeral 12. So regular education, athletics, Trumbull, VOAG, all of those accounts together would amount to about 100. Right now, we're projecting about $114,000 surplus for a total expenditure of $2,747,842. And for the same reasons, when the 17-18 budget was put together, we still had 2 buses that we were transporting to Bridgeport Aquaculture. Once the enrollment going to Bridgeport Aquaculture, and this is going into a little bit of, I believe, in the next question, but once that enrollment went below 50 students, we no longer needed 2 buses. We only needed 1, so there's a savings there. There's savings in gasoline that we're currently having. And then also, a big portion of it is that 40-minute window that Dr. Fieser spoke about the other night. The board, when the 17-18 budget was enacted, the board had not made the decision to change the school hours for elementary and for middle. And so we didn't have the benefit of those 40 minutes in our calculation. Once that additional 10 minutes at each level came into play, then we were building bus routes based on 40 minutes rather than 30 minutes.
Okay.
I'll take the next question, which is a question on the Bridgeport Aquaculture and why the drop in enrollment. It's a good question. We have 39 students currently participating in the program, whereas in the last 4 years, we had an average of 51, 52 students in the program. Once it goes over 50, we need 2 buses. Because it was 39 this year, we only need 1 bus, and we're anticipating that it's not going to jump back up to 12 students next year. I actually asked the counselors at the high school what did they see was the reason for students for the drop, because it's been pretty consistent for a number of years. And I heard some very specific information from Foreign. For the teacher who oversees the aqua program, and what she indicated was that kids are choosing to stay in Milford because there have been so many more options for kids at the high school with respect to courses and programs, et cetera, that a number of students have just chose not to go this year. Also, we've had a couple of students who have gone to aqua and returned to Milford. So Did I miss 33? Oops, sorry. Mr. Richatelli, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So the question is, at specifically ECA, Education Center for the Arts, the Bridgeport Aquaculture program, and the Trumbull VOAG program. The question is, are there any students being turned away for those programs, or are they all being accommodated? And a little different for each one. But specifically, Milford pays for a certain amount of seats at each of the programs. And the Bridgeport Aquaculture, we pay a flat rate, and that's for a minimum of 26 students. There's no maximum. We can have as many students as want to apply for that program. So there is no waiting list for that one. And as Dr. Fieser said, we currently have 39 students enrolled at the Bridgeport Aquaculture program. The Education Center for the Arts, we, for many years, have paid for 31 seats, and we're allotted 31 seats. In my discussions with them, there's a small wait list each year, and it depends upon the discipline for which the Education Center for the Arts, and Carol, please jump in. ECA, there's the visual arts, there's the performing arts, there's all kinds of different programs that the students can get into. And so the most popular one, from what I understand, is the visual arts. So there may be a waiting list in visual arts, but there's not the full amount for, we'll say, dance. There's students that are open there. So last year, we only had 29 students that were enrolled at ECA or in the program. Again, the max we can have is 31, but there were 29 students, but there was still a wait list on some of the programs that there were too many students in. So that's the status of ECA. And then Trumbull VOAG, typically over the years we've paid for approximately 24 to 26 seats. State law requires us to pay for students to go to the aquaculture, the VOAG program. And state law says that if you don't have a written agreement with the school, then it depends on there's a formula on how many students the district has to pay for. Over the past 2 years, Trumbull has exceeded that, and so we're currently in discussions with Trumbull VOAG, and our goal in those discussions is to max out at 24 students that will pay for 6 incoming freshmen each year. But because they've enrolled more than what they should have for the past couple of years, we can't take that out on the students. We've got to allow those students to get through the program, so we'll phase back down to the 24 where we believe that it should be. But typically, about 15 students apply for the 9th grade, and typically 6 to 7 are accepted. So there is a wait list for the Trumbull VOAG program.
Mr. DeYoung?
So on ECA, the wait list is their wait list, it's not our wait list. In other words, we're not turning kids away because we don't want to pay for it. They're turning them away because they don't have the space for them.
Well, actually, I'm not sure about that. It's
We have
been 31.
Sometimes there's 31 students, that's the number of seats we have. That's
Right.
an agreement that was made years ago with
Sure.
ECA, with ACES. So if the 31 students are accepted, there may be 35 kids that have applied.
But it doesn't matter how much money you have, you can't send 35. You can only send 31.
No, we have 31 seats.
Right.
That's correct.
But last year, there were 29 that went, but a couple ended up on the wait list because of an ECA wait list, not our
Right.
wait list. And then on the Trumbull, is that a financial limitation? That we're only sending 6, or the goal is to only send 6 per?
There's a lot of history.
Okay.
This actually goes back to, I'm not sure if it actually went to court, but there was special legislation regarding, how many students Milford had to pay for to go to the other program. it's a long history, and it's been at that 24 to 25 number for a good number of years, as many years as the program, as long as we've been sending students there, and they've exceeded the formula.
What happened is that the law says that when you determine how many kids come in your ninth grade, it has to be the average of the 3 previous years in your ninth grade. And,
Okay.
and two years in a row, what happened is Trumbull exceeded it
By accepting more.
by
more kids.
accepting more. So we picked up on it and just said, wait a second here.
Right.
The law says this, so we're gonna be meeting with them about that issue. Because part of it is, first of all, because the law is not being followed, but the other piece is that it's expensive.
Sure.
You know, and the truth is if a student isn't able to go to Trumbull VOAG, they can go to another VOAG school.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, it's not as if they won't be able to go to a vocational, they're entitled
Right.
to go to a vocational agricultural school.
Okay.
It just may not be in Trumbull. So, you know, it's not as if somebody would be denied,
A
you know,
chance to
that
get-
kind of an education, it's just that they would be denied in Trumbull.
We also pay for the transportation too, we're required to pay for both.
Right.
So it's tuition plus transportation.
And
Any other VOAG, if they didn't go to Trumbull, they could go someplace else, we would still be paying for them to go someplace else.
We wouldn't provide a bus, we would reimburse the parents up
Okay.
to a certain amount that the law requires us to.
Okay.
Just one
Mhm.
last question. On the Bridgeport program, if we have students that are choosing to stay at our high schools because we offer presumably enough of what they would get in Bridgeport, do we think that program in Bridgeport has run its course for us, or?
I think it's 1 year. I mean, you know.
Oh, it's
again,
not a trend, it's just
No,
this
this
one
it
past year?
dropped 12 students. Do we
Yeah.
think that it'll jump back up? I would be surprised, that was a big drop.
Yeah, sure.
So I think we'd have to watch it. But the question was, why did it drop? And that's, you know, Foreign actually spoke with some students, you know, spoke with the counselors, and that's what they concluded.
So it's too early to tell?
It's too early to tell.
Thank you.
Other questions on this?
I just
Ms.
had
Zenz?
just a quick question about the VOAG schools. If they weren't going to Trumbull, where would they go for a VOAG school?
I believe is it New Haven that has a VOAG school? I mean, I'm not familiar with where all the vocational,
I was just curious to know if they were as local as Trumbull, or if that
No,
were.
Trumbull's the
potentially-
closest.
It is the closest.
Yeah, there's one, I know that there's one in Wallingford, and there probably is in New Haven too.
New Haven or Hampton, or, I'm not really sure.
Okay.
Mrs. Federico?
I just wanted to offer an additional comment on the Bridgeport Aqua program. I think it's similar to what you said, Dr. Fieser, that there's things that they want to take in Milford schools. And sometimes the schedule, if they're going to the Aqua program, the schedule doesn't allow for it. So
Good
it's,
point.
so it's a choice, similar to what you said, there's more things they want to offer in they want to take in Milford. Or sometimes there's requirements that they need to take in Milford, and they can't quite fit that into their day with Aqua. So that's been
Good
what
point.
I've heard about why some students may have
I
left.
appreciate that. And so, all the more reason why we can't draw any conclusions, but at least for this year, that seems to be
That's the reason.
some of the reasons.
Any other questions on this one? Okay, thank you.
Question 35 is a little more complex. Gets into some of the details about transportation for special education, and I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Swift.
Sure. So the question is specific to the increase in the total spending for special ed transportation. And so I thought it would make sense to just describe a little bit about what special education transportation entails. So these 4 accounts include the cost for transportation for special ed students within the district, which is the internal line, and the transportation for students to 20 different out-of-district placements. That's the public and private line, which involves transporting students to specialized school within Milford or to other towns and cities as far as Hartford. In addition, we also cover the cost for transporting homeless students from Milford to their home district or from their current dwelling to Milford, depending on where the school of origin is. under the protection of the McKinney-Vento Act. And that's a very hard line item to predict. It can fluctuate greatly within a year. It can be a quiet year. You just never know. The special education internal transportation is carried out mainly by Durham Bus Company, and also we have a small fleet, if you will, if I could call it a fleet, of 4 vans of our own that we use to do as much of the transportation as we can for cost savings. But we use Durham for most of our internal transportation, and it covers the school year and our extended school year summer programs as well. The internal transportation line increased unexpectedly this year due to the addition of a special ed program at Live Oaks. For the start of the 2017-18 school year, the type 2 bus that we have, which are the small yellow special education buses that transport students to the school, is full. You know, not all special ed students who are eligible for that particular bus use that transportation. The parents opt to drive them, but tomorrow, if one more student decides to ride that bus, we'll have to get another bus, and we budgeted for that for next year. In addition, in October of this year, we unexpectedly had to open another preschool class at Pumpkin Delight School due to the large number of enrolling 3-year-olds. And again, it's hard to predict the number of 3-year-olds you're gonna have come in. And what's unusual about a single preschool classroom is it is actually an AM class and a PM class, so it involves 4 bus runs for one day, and the total cost of that for the year is $79,000. The public and private transportation is carried out by various transportation companies through an annual bidding process. So it depends on the students' needs, it depends on whether they need a wheelchair, how many aids do they need, what kind of access do they have to have, what do we know about that transportation company, and their reliability. So we go through the bidding process and choose the best fit for the children. This also includes school year and extended school year transportation. This line item is definitely the most difficult to predict. At any given time, we could become responsible for a state place student that might have very complex needs, and it can be very, very costly. So I gave you an example that, you know, right now we have 3 students who their total transportation costs are over $100,000, and that can fluctuate. You know, tomorrow we could lose somebody, or we could get 2 more tomorrow. So it's very hard to predict. And then the other line item is the bus aids that we have. So we have 43 aids supporting students on bus runs, and this would be primarily on our Durham bus runs, the type 2 buses. The amount of aids we need varies greatly. It depends on, some students need one-on-one support depending on whatever their needs may be. Other buses just need a grown-up on there. So for example, if you have a bunch of 3-year-olds on a bus with seat belts, and they realize they can unbuckle a seatbelt, if there isn't a grown-up on there other than the bus driver to make sure they stay in their seatbelt, it's not a safe situation. So we have all different reasons for having adult supervision on the buses. This year we have 40 AM and PM bus runs and 9 midday bus runs that require adult supervision. And again, we have our vans too, which are used not only to supplement the bus runs to and from school, but they also transport our students to job sites, to different schools. So we have some students from law who go to the academy midday and engage in all different types of vocational training and whatnot. So when we added our vans, we were able to save a lot of money, which is really helpful. So. The other thing that's important to mention that I didn't put in my answer, you'll see that the public line item reduced, and that was because of the fact that we were able to bring some students back home to our program at Foreign. So while the cost of that transportation reduced, those students still need specialized transportation, but now it's under the internal line item. So I hope that answers the question, whomever asked it.
Questions? Ms. Pinzens?
The vans you're talking about, your fleet, is there a chance that we could increase the number of vans that we have to potentially bring down more costs, or is that something that wouldn't really take effect at this point because there's too many kids on a bus? I don't know.
You know what, it's really difficult to manage 4 vans. It probably doesn't sound like it is, but it is so hard.
I can't
Number one,
manage my
it's
one kid.
very difficult to
That's why.
find a van driver who has the right kind of certification. We've had that job posted for months and months, I think over a year at one point, trying to fill it. And it's really frustrating when you have a vehicle and no driver, because that seems extremely wasteful. And I would fear how cumbersome it would become should we add many more. It's like running a little bus company on top of running everything else, so it's very tricky.
Thank you.
Mr. Zentrowicz?
Thanks. Just a quick question. Are there any dedicated van drivers for the 4 vans?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah,
How many?
we have 4 van drivers and a
Oh, you do?
substitute,
Okay.
yes.
Am I correct that the aides that would ride the buses with the students, they're are special ed paras that are given like a stipend to extend their day to be on the bus?
They get paid for an hour for a morning run and paid for an hour for an afternoon run, and it typically doesn't interrupt their workday.
Right.
Although sometimes we do have a dedicated bus para who could do multiple runs in a row for whatever reason, but that's rare.
Mr.
That extra amount, sorry, thank you.
That's okay.
Is that extra amount, is that included in their regular salary, or is that another line item in the transportation? The extra hour that they're getting paid, either morning,
I'm
afternoon?
not sure where that is, Jim. Do you?
Yes, it's in, let me get, Terry's gonna tell, hourly aids.
It's in 51, it says special ed aid and van driver, isn't it 5109? Where it is?
Okay. Thank you, that's, I see it now, yep.
Mr. DeYoung?
The issue of transporting homeless students, is that currently a big issue that we're facing, or? Like,
It's not a big issue, but.
well, I don't mean an issue, but I mean, we have a lot of students that we're servicing that have that situation.
Well, I can tell you that right now, our projected payment for transporting to homeless, if it stays stable, is $20,000 for this year.
Okay. All right.
But it could change tomorrow, it could drop, or it could increase, so.
Right, okay.
We had a large amount after Hurricane Sandy.
I bet.
People were homeless and living out of town, but we were required to transport them to their home school.
And we were actually anticipating an increase with families coming from Puerto Rico into the area, but it really hasn't impacted Milford. I'm watchful for it.
Ms. Pinzens?
Does that include children of families from like the Bethel shelter or Mercy Learning Center or Bridgeport if they wanted to come here? How does that work?
Well, the way it works is if a child, let's say a child lived in Stratford and they were temporarily placed in the Bethel Center and their ultimate plan was to go back to Stratford, we would keep the child in the Stratford school and transport them to the Stratford school, from Milford to Stratford.
So these aren't necessarily students coming to Milford Public Schools, we just are transferring them to their home school, wherever that may be.
Yep, and then you figure out who's responsible for that payment. Sometimes there's a shared cost between the two districts, and you really have to know the story and know what the family's plan is, and then try to support them to keep their life as stable as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Federico?
The additional preschool class at Pumpkin, where the cost of the transportation is $79,000, which line is that in? Is that in the internal?
That's part of the explanation for the increase in the budget for the internal. And I can tell you
Internal,
that
okay.
this year, with the unexpected addition of that, Classroom Durham has been very good to us in the pricing for that unexpected addition. They're a great company to work with.
Okay, so, thank you. So in the internal, it's the increase for the preschool and then the program at Live Oaks?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
And the shift of some of the students that we brought home from out-of-district placements that now fall under internal.
okay. And why do we have, it looks like the private is going up about 100,000? What are we anticipating that could change?
Well, it's based on the number of students that we have and the cost of transportation.
Okay.
The increases. So if our student numbers change, we have to project what the cost will be.
Okay, so it's based on our projected number of students for next year.
And it's really hard to know that because we can look at what we have now
Mhm.
and we could bring 3 of those students home and it would reduce, or, you know, we might have some kids move in who are already in an out-of-district placement elsewhere, and so when they come to us, they remain there. There's just so many unknowns, so we
Okay,
do
so-
our best projecting.
So we include maybe somewhat of a placeholder for some of those potential changes that could occur?
To the best of
Okay.
our ability, we
Sure.
do, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Did you have a question, Craig, before? Any other questions on this one? Okay.
Now, the next question, this is 36, the out-of-town magnet transportation and project choice. So we currently have 40 students from New Haven enrolled in the Milford Public Schools through Project Choice. You should know that the district has been a supporter of Project Choice for decades. I don't know when it began to participate, but we value the program. We benefit from having students in our schools, and we believe the students benefit as well. And these students are in grade levels across K-12. So that's,
Mr.
and
DeYoung?
we do not pay, we do not transport. New Haven transports the students every day to Milford to the schools.
Just curious, is there a cap on the number of students we'll allow to come for Project Choice?
No, we
Through that
make
program?
that decision, and, you know, we're always mindful of where are we with respect to enrollment.
Mhm.
And generally speaking, most of the kids we choose, I shouldn't say kids, because we don't choose the kids, but the spots that we have open, we look to the elementary schools, because if we're bringing children in, we would like to bring them in at the younger grades, so then
Sure.
they're with us. That's not to suggest that we don't ever take say a middle school kid, but it's primarily at the elementary. So we're looking at, where might there be openings, but if it's too close to tipping where we'd have to hire another teacher, we're not going to
Right.
do that.
How does it compare to the number of Milford students who go to New Haven schools?
I want to say a figure, but I'm afraid to say it. So let me get that for
Okay,
sure.
no problem, thank you.
So in the magnet schools, you mean, in New
Right,
Haven,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So board members, the next series of questions goes into a different object series, 6,000s, it's 9:15. And, we're on question 37, and we have so far, 48, and then I think we have a couple of additional questions that will come before us. So do we want to stop? It's 9:15, and pick up tomorrow. We have, a full budget workshop scheduled for tomorrow as well.
Tomorrow's fine for me.
Okay?
Sounds good.
Mr.
Before you
Jelly?
adjourn, I
Yep.
think we have the answer to the number of magnet students.
Oh,
I think
okay.
I think it's in one of the frequently asked questions. Mr. Burke's looking. uh,
100 students are enrolled in Milford Middle School.
Actually, that's what I was going to say, but then I said,
Where is that? What
It's
number is that?
page A4, question, frequently asked question number 19.
And most of those students are in K-8. It's the exception that we would have a student who is in the high schools in that magnet school. So we find that a number of students, maybe in an elementary or maybe, most of the magnets are K-8.
Yeah.
And then kids will come back. Or sometimes we have kids who will come back after grade 5 and go into our middle schools, so.
And are there kids from, I'm sorry, I know you want to wrap up, Ms.
No,
Glenn, but
that's
are there kids from other towns, other cities besides New Haven that are in,
They come in,
that come into Milford? No.
Okay, so, we have, public comment.
no comment,
We're not gonna let you talk.
no comment.
All right, I can't find my public comment statement. Oh, no, here it is, I got it, no, let's be formal. Speakers may offer objective comments about school personnel and programs. The board encourages speakers not to express personal complaints or defamatory comments about the Milford Board of Education personnel or any person associated with Milford Public School System. Security issues and matters relating to the negotiations and grievances will not be permitted, consistent with the principles of the Federal Education Right to Privacy Act. Discussion of students is prohibited absent parental waiver. Public comment this evening is limited to our agenda item, which is the budget. Mrs. Burney, you have the floor.
Yep. Kathy Burney, 96 Centennial Drive. First of all, I am sorry to disagree with you. There are numerous high school students
Oh, apologize.
in the magnet schools. New Haven magnet schools go from K to 12.
No, I know that. I'm saying that the most of the students that go to New Haven come
Eastham
back.
has 23 Milford students, and that goes from 6 to 12, just so you know.
Well, we also monitor, just to respond, the number of students who come back at the end of 8th grade. And I'm just simply saying is that talking about 100 students, it's a small percentage of students.
In the
who-
whole.
Correct.
I agree. Pat Bradbury, you're not gonna get a better person than that. He is very proactive, he is very good at his job, and he is the best asset we have for this city to make saving. Just so you know. So if he's looking for this system, because I had questions on this, because I said, when we closed Simon Lake, they talked about using part of that as storage, and they were gonna do, inventory there. So I had questions, but he pretty much covered all of them. Behavioralists, okay? People who don't have kids with special needs don't have a clue as to the volume of issues we deal with. Kids can be put on medications that change their behavior, speaking from experience. And these behavioralists come in and they are a godsend because they've got that knowledge to help teachers, students, the whole school help with kids that have special needs, that are on special drugs that help them. So, covering you. Some of the other things, hold on. The curriculum writing, okay, where did the money go, the $75,000? Where is that budgeted? Because I was having trouble finding that. The enrichment program. Years ago, my daughter, when she was in the Milford school system, she used to go to Calf Penn Meadow. The enrichment program, these teachers had designated classrooms, so these kids did awesome projects. They were absolutely unbelievable, and then things got changed around, and the teachers had to move school to school. It was very unsettling, is the best word I could come up with right now. And I gotta tell you, hearing from the teachers themselves, they were very upset.
15 seconds.
So this change is absolutely awesome. I gotta tell you, awesome job on the budget. I love it. I do have questions, but I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you very much. Anybody else for public comment? All right, seeing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So we'll meet tomorrow, same time, same place.
Bad time.